In spite of having earned what I'd consider a lifetime's worth of nerd cred, what with the incessant gaming and the movies and the comics and cartoons and books and such, I'm not all that experienced with traditional tabletop role-playing games. Honestly, I never had enough friends to dig in and enjoy them when I was growing up. Furthermore, the rulebooks, lore, and other franchise-specific tomes that often accompany role-playing games always intimidated me. And while I can readily explain and extrapolate the history of the Skywalker family, or give detailed history of the USS Enterprise and all its antecedents, I couldn't tell the difference between a D&D vampire or a Vampire the Masquerade Fanger. Or more to the point for the purposes of this review, I couldn't spot a Warhammer 40k Space Marine nestled in a gaggle of Inquisitors even if you paid me. So when I tell you I went into Space Marine 2 without a single nerd-credentialed expectation, you know I'm being as candid as I can be. My wife and I began playing the campaign in co-op a few days after a recent birthday, and what we experienced was a pretty compelling reason to delve deeper into the larger Warcraft universe. As I understand it, and please feel free to correct me in the comments, Warhammer basically comes in two vivid and original flavors, the last of which is a pretty cool dystopian nightmare full of violence and death and pseudo-religious conquests, and big chonky dudes in blue armor unloading clip after clip into swarming hordes of wicked heretical aliens. To be fair, I have dabbled in some other Warcraft video games, and at this point there are more than a few good ones. Vermintide 1 and 2, Darktide, Boltgun, Chaos Bane, Blood Bowl, I've played these, but the essence of Warhammer 40k never truly sunk in, probably because none of those games told compelling enough stories to hook me. But Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 is different. It cares about its narrative in a way that made me care as well, and the gameplay is cool and compelling enough to keep me locked in for the duration. First off, and most obviously, cursory comparisons to Microsoft's Gears of War franchise are well earned. Space Marine 2 looks and plays a lot like Gears in many respects, although the visuals are often on another level, owing of course to new design tech and stouter hardware to run it on. The vast hordes you'll see swarm across the environment and then swallow your fireteam position is something to behold. Also, I have 6 words for you. Chainsaw sword, chainsaw sword, chainsaw sword. That was 6, right? The block and parry mechanics of Space Marine 2's swords, knives, and blunt weapons are perhaps not as intricate as some hardcore action fans may want, but a good finisher is always, but always, a joy to pull off. Essentially, half the combat experience of this game is close quarters, bloody, and fierce, allowing for some pretty cool timed executions and an admittedly modest assortment of baddies on which to exercise your righteous fury. I loved tackling bigger alien variants, simultaneously countering and blocking and stabbing and executing, all while trading bullets from my sidearm, tossing out grenades and popping stims so I didn't, die gurgling in my blue armor. As for gunplay, Space Marine 2 rocks the Casbah, rocks the hostile extraterrestrial planet. Players get 2 standard weapon slots in addition to the aforementioned melee weapon varieties. Rifles are called, simply enough, bolt guns, and there are a few automatics and semis and explosives or more personalized marksman options. Your sidearms are perhaps less interesting, composed of basic pistols and semi-autos and energy guns, but those are really just your backups and your excuses to slash and saw your way through bodies without losing any of that hard-won gun-toting Space Marine respect. Truth be told, and to put my critic hat on seriously for a moment, much of the combat in Space Marine 2 never quite hits the highs the game so earnestly reaches for. Yes, all the hordes and swarming hordes are very cool, utilizing the same visual motif of the mass anthill or beehive-like activity of the zombies from World War Z, but look, the anticipation and payoff of these sequences seems to get smaller and smaller the more you survive them, especially since, occasionally, they feel slightly staged and non-threatening. That isn't to say Space Marine 2 is easy, because it isn't. Challenge is nice and even on its normal difficulty level, but to a large extent, once the novelty wears off, so does some of the tension. I truly loved juggling long and close-range targets, engaging in dynamic sword brawls, staying mobile enough not to get completely overwhelmed, but there were plenty of sections of play that felt too familiar, too linear, too by the numbers, especially in light of other third-person action shooters that have trodden this ground so well in recent years. That said, you'll never want for an excellent bloodbath or two, holy cow. And such sweetly rendered gore it is, too. Character animations and models are top-notch, except perhaps in close-ups. As imposing and cool as these guys look, fully decked out in their armor, the relative visual fidelity of their facial renders looks a bit dated. I also experienced some pop-in and frame rate issues on Xbox, especially while playing in fidelity mode. But the environments, oh man, some of the prettiest worlds I've seen in a game like this to date. I can't express how expansive and imposing the massive blocky ships of the Imperium are, or how small and intimidated I felt standing in great stone fortresses or sprawling swamplands. Environments in Space Marine 2 are linear and channeled, not in any way open world, but so are all the environments in, say, the aforementioned Gears of War series, and people never seem to complain too much about that. Everything to see, all the ground to cover, it's effective enough, even if it occasionally feels too narrow. As for the narrative quality of the 10 to 12 hour campaign, the more you know about Warhammer 40k, the more you'll thrive. My wife and I were left scratching our heads at some of the subtler points, but the story does an admirable and suitably melodramatic and grim job stringing together playable sections and major story beats. Two additional, and to some players perhaps more desirable, game modes exist as well. One a versus PvP and the other squad-based PvE. Though the campaign is robust and full and is possibly the major selling point, the multiplayer modes are what will ultimately decide the longevity of the game, the community it will cultivate, and its ability to keep generating revenue for developer-focused entertainment. Both PvP and PvE, respectively dubbed Eternal War and Operations, are class-based. Those who enjoy the play of the campaign will especially like Operations mode, which presents the breadth of all the chaos and mayhem the core game has to offer. It remains to be seen how much additional content and support-focused entertainment will provide in the long run, but I suspect they'll keep Space Marine 2 running strong for a few years at least to come. In the final analysis, it seems clear to me that Space Marine 2, the formula is ripe for further growth. Elements such as enemy and weapon variety and the kinds of basic encounters players regularly experience could do with some tweaking and fine-tuning. But as a complete package, the game is very good, very compelling. No, I'm not much of a Warhammer fan, but not because I find the world's characters and lore dull. On the contrary, what little contact I've had with this universe has only served to intrigue me. Which is to say that when it wants to, when it's really firing on all cylinders, Space Marine 2 is extremely entertaining. The game is no slouch, even in full consideration of the deluge of excellent games that have dropped in recent months. And that's just playing on console, because having seen plenty of PC footage, I can attest to the power of this thing when allowed to operate at its optimal settings. Nevertheless, play on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox should result in the same conclusion. Space Marine 2 is a victor of the genre. Worthy of every spoil of Inquisition it's got coming to it. Jeff Bull Central gives Warhammer 40k, Space Marine 2, a chonky suited 8 out of 10. Now get out there and be all you can be, Marine. Semper Fi. Or maybe just slay and pray, oh holy martyr. Stay tuned to Jeff Bull Central for more gaming videos, and also check out my music, entertainment, and mental health content. Like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're always caught up. Until next time, folks, the only good alien heretic is a dead alien heretic. I think. They never seem to survive long when I'm around.
Not saying it ain't worth it anymore. It's just you've never given me that look before. That longing game